Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm here with the lovely Charlotte Crowther. She's the founder of the Signature Framework. She helps experts codify and visualize and leverage their signature framework to become the go-to expert in their field, which is really important if you're an author. And she helps them scale their authority, make bigger impact and more revenue. Who doesn't want that? Especially if you're writing a book, you want to make the biggest impact you can. And I'm so thrilled to have her here. We have a mutual friend named David, and we're going to talk all about what it takes to turn this book idea into a framework that can be usable, and also this creative process that we both seem to have a affinity for in our work. So welcome to the show, Charlotte.
It's all lovely to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. When we first talked off camera, we were just kind of getting to know each other. One of the things that really struck me is your artistic journey to get where you are. Though you work with businesses and leaders now, you didn't start that way. Tell us a little bit about the brief history that got you to this idea. I should be creating signature frameworks for others.
Yeah, sure. So I actually began life as a professional artist. Say professional. So I started young at 13 and worked for 10 years in the field and left that career selling my artwork to banks and collectors around the world. And I started young because I actually sold artwork at a young age. People would, it's pocket money now, but I learned how to be an entrepreneur and sell and be creative sort of on demand at an early age. Um, at the end of that chapter, I realized that my creativity was only as good as my ability to think outside of myself and break my own patterns. Otherwise, you're just an echo chamber. So I
Yeah.
became really interested in that and got into the coaching space and trained in a methodology called Grenberg. It's not a very well known methodology. Um, and the concepts are sort of a shift in our usual way of thinking. And because they're not simple concepts, I would draw and make diagrams to explain them to my clients. And they got them more quickly, acted them more quickly, got the results more quickly, and to my surprise, recommended me more quickly too to their friends. And
Yeah.
that was the beginnings of the signature framework work that I do now.
Right.
And when I worked in the online space, where you're sort of teaching at scale, and you need to help people understand at scale what you do. This experience became really useful, and I've worked with a number of educators, coaches, consultants to make their methodologies and unique work more well known and used.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really important because sometimes it's difficult to translate words that are on a page into easy to understand information for others, especially if it's at a glance, especially if it's to sell or help someone understand why you're the authority that could help them. A book's job is to bring a reader closer to the author by getting them to feel vulnerable, feel close to them, like they understand them, like they feel heard. But you can't do that and give all of the goods because you'd run out of time. There'd be thousands of page books that people would never read. So, an effort to get an author, let's say we have an author here listening to the show who's like, yeah, I really want to build my coaching based on my book, and I have all these principles. What are the things that you notice that authors sort of miss or skip over when they're planning some sort of business or framework on their books or their signature ideas?
Yeah, sure. So it's, it's it's an interesting thing because on one hand you're building a business, on another hand you're refining your message, on another hand you're becoming known for your unique approach to something, and you have all these important components, but they don't necessarily have a structure. So what often an analogy I like to use is, you have a wardrobe and you have your clothes a bit here, a bit there. That some might be on the floor. You've got your jumpers mixed in with t-shirts, the trousers, and you've got all these ideas everywhere, but there isn't any structure. So by organizing your ideas and bringing a structure to them, particularly around your methodology, allows you to basically create an SOP for your IP. And when you have that, you have the foundations for your message, um, your methodology, and how to stand out with your thinking and ideas. And when you also visualize this framework, it's very easy for people to read and understand, and for you to become known for your signature thinking.
Great. One of the things that I noticed when we work with really smart, talented humans is that they don't often completely understand why they're magic or what special thing they have. Um, how do you get that out of them? How do you draw out of them these details that are necessary for understanding what makes them so unique in their methodology?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the thing with ideas is they can be very abstract. And so what's really powerful about saying, okay, what is my methodology? You have to be very concrete. And you have to say, okay, if I want to enable this person to achieve this result, let me work back from that result and really clarify what those steps are to achieve it. And in the process of doing that, you get really clear about what's in, what's out, what's going to be useful, what's just a nice to have. And you refine your methodology, which is effectively your point of view on how to do X. And that premise comes out, your values and beliefs come out, and your experience and insight into like what actions to take to be effective and successful in achieving said result. And there's something, one, people rarely sit down to really stop and do that exercise. But the exercise is so concrete, it really surfaces all your signature ideas and concepts and beliefs and approaches. And it gives it that framework. And then it's so much easier to talk about it, explain it, share it with others. Um, and with that process, also get clearer on what your message is.
Right. One of the things that I have trouble with, and the reason I ask is I have lots of trouble sometimes if I don't speak to somebody clarifying why I'm different. Luckily, I have a lot of referrals. That's like you, when people work with me, they talk about it. And so it's hopeful, but it's also not easy to communicate to people something that other people do. Like they've called me a book coach, and I use that word, but that's not what I am. I'm not coaching people to write a book. And I know that's why these frameworks that you create are important. So people then go, what do you do? I said, I get the barriers out of the way so that people can write. They know how to write. It's one word after the other. The barriers often for my clients are that they assume that writing a book's like doing something in school. And it's the opposite. I tell them school is what made you an editor, not made you a writer. You're not a writer because you don't know what you would say if you didn't have an assignment, right? So they get stuck. Like I want to get the thesis of this book so I can write it. I go, oh, I think of writing as art. I don't think of it as an assignment in school. And they look at me strange. I'm like, because you believe that editing is more important than writing. So you're going to write a sentence and delete it, write, delete, write. You value editing more than you value the creative process. And that's how they write. Academics in general write that way. My job is I have to unplug them and unlearn them from the traditional teaching system and make them think differently about writing so that their message isn't interrupted by their thinking about writing. Because in their mitigation of this thinking, they're thinking about, well, what will my colleagues say? Well, I can't say that. My mom won't like that. Or I want it to be better than Atomic Habits, so I can't do that. They're thinking too much. And the thinking creates an editor brain, which then separates them from the true work, which is their truth, who they are. And who they are doesn't need to get mitigated by some process. But in school, you never get told, do write whatever you want and turn it in. No, you get told this is what your assignment is. And so to unlearn that for me is the majority of the process, but it isn't, this is how you write a book. Because they don't need me for that. They know how to write a book. There's a beginning, a middle, and end, and there's words. That's a book. You don't need me. You don't need anybody. So tell me a little bit about why your work, because we work with a couple of different friends, right? We have Ali, we have David, we have people in common that we've worked with. How do you make sure you guide them through a process that allows them to stay in their creative zone and bring out the best of themselves and not assume they know what their best parts are?
Yeah. As you speak, it really reminds me of my creative background as an artist, and I think I take it for granted that I just operating in a creative space, and I can't imagine not. So I think I probably bring that more to the space than I realize. So
Right.
you're making me reflect a little bit here. Um, I think a lot of it is not knowing. A lot of my clients, you know, will say, you'll guide me, right? And I'm like, I'll hold the space and I'll listen. And I think that alone just instantly relaxes them
Yeah.
because, like that actually doesn't happen often a lot in life. And with my coaching background as well, I'm trained in that and I enjoy that. It's a pleasure, but it's where creativity happens. It's where you stop and breathe and think and allow yourself to connect those dots that have been there, but suddenly you give space for them to take form and shape. So I think I partly just do it intuitively because that's my 20-year background as a coach for 10 years, as an artist for 10 years. Um, but I'm one of the things I learned from art is trusting in the unknown. So I think I hold that space and sort of guide them through that from the beginning and kind of call that out. And what's great is they're the expert, and I'm helping them give shape or language to that. So there's a lot of sort of trust in me and in that process, and through that they gain that trust in themselves. Um, and and I'm so with you in that not being busy with these thoughts and competing. I can imagine, particularly in your work, because it is, writing and words, people get so busy with that. I think I get to skip that a little bit because people get, it's a visual and it's a framework and they're trying to bring their concepts together. So kind of, one of the spaces we work in is a whiteboard. And one of the exercises I ask people to do is to sketch and write out their ideas, from the beginning. Um, and explain them aloud as a way of sort of refining their thinking. Um, but yeah, it's such an important thing, and one of the key parts of my methodology and signature framework is a step called incubation, which is a step in the creative process that people don't call out enough. I don't think like the sort of giving yourself time away from your creative work so you can subconsciously keep working on it is like one of the biggest hacks out there. People do it accidentally, like, oh yeah, I just have this great idea in the shower, but doing it like on purpose, intentionally, and using that as part of the creative process, and not forcing it when something isn't coming. So I think it's really building that trust muscle. But I think calling it out from the outset and having and naming that as a part of the process of working with me, I think really gives permission to my clients. Yeah.
Yeah. Ironically, I tell most of my authors words get in the way of really good books. And mainly because I think my clients are clients, the ones we share in common too, that believe that if I get the words right, it will be right. I said, well, it's not an English assignment. You're not getting the words right. I want you to find the message. What's the truth under all this? So you're saying these things, but what's true? And they get so confused because I'm not asking them for words. And I say, well, point to it. Point to how I know it's true. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't want to give them the answer. I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer. I'm just holding space for them to be confused, because in the confusion, then uncertainty arises. And when uncertainty arises, the truth emerges from within them, is how I perceive it. So when I ask them simple questions, my job is to guide them through the thoughts that they left unturned because they seem too simple to worry about. And that's when simple things like, well, Ali, why did you start this business? Where did it happen? Honestly, I just love to have fun. I like having fun. I go, that's the simple idea that's underneath everything you do. And that simple idea can be easily overlooked by a publisher who thinks, yeah, but that's not a system. I'm like, oh my God, one of the most well-educated, top of his class from Cambridge is telling you he's used fun, and you're trying to tell him, no, you're not the expert. He is. Like, this is fun is it. Let him explain it to you. So I think what I really love when we talk is I get energized. I go, wow, I love my job. I love the work. I love clients. I love nurturing them. What part of the work for you gets you so excited?
Yeah, you know, what drives me is, as we're sort of speaking here, that the courage that, for example, with Ali to say, hey, fun is what's driven this whole thing, that I've ended up, getting an audience of millions with. That courage to be so human and to share that is how he evolves as a human being, but also how we as a collective evolve as human beings. And so what I find exciting is these people who step up to be leaders and share their message, share their story, share their experience. That through the space that we create and the work that we do together, they step into that and enable that for themselves and for others. And I am excited about how to use visuals to expedite that process for themselves and in their communication of their message and action for others.
Yeah. Do you find that some of the work you do with authors or with leaders, because I know you work with leaders as well, when something strikes them, I always find it really interesting when there was something subconscious that they didn't see before, and then they see it. Um, it's so magical. But for me, I have to make them do things that they don't like, like draw. Like when I make doctors draw, they look at me like I'm crazy. But what I'm trying to get them to do is let go of their expectation of what writing is, because writing has an imprint for them. Whether they thought they were good at it, which is not it's not a value when you're doing this work for authors. If they think they're good at it, then they'll hold back. If they think they're bad at it, then they'll hold back. So I have to let go. I have to help them let go of these beliefs that they're either. What I want, that's why I want them to draw, because then we're on an equal playing field. If they're artists, it's not a bit easier. It's harder for them because, like, oh my god, now they have this expectation it's supposed to be good, and all I'm trying to do is help them let go of their belief about what this is, so that we can be curious about what it could be. Because the message lies just under the surface of what they know, and if they can let go of what they think they know, then they'll find the answers to the problem without trying. They just surface. That's my experience. And it's really difficult when you're having a doctor who's writing a book for medical school students to be able to have that clarity. But when they do, they let go and they start to write in their own voice, not the voice of what they think they should write. They start writing things that matter to them, not the ones they think matter to others. That's the magic for me. When does the magic happen for you and your clients?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is when you draw out your ideas and you're thinking on a piece of paper, on an iPad, on a whiteboard, whether that's physical or digital, you start thinking from your body and less from your mind, and you can just kind of free flow and let the dots sort of join and connect. And also when you're sort of shaping that into diagrams and showing how the relationships between the concepts, you also see the gaps in your thinking, um, and the essence of what you're thinking sort of comes out and bubbles to the surface too. So I think it's this magic of logic and creativity, this kind of fusion sort of comes out of like evolution and thinking, but also structure and thought. And it's that combination of structure and logic and creativity that enables these new ideas, and for thought leaders, for authors, for leaders to bring all their implicit experience and insight and make it explicit. And that's where the magic happens. And as you say, they're out of their head more. Um, and when it's visual, it's often easier to kind of speak to because some things are not so tangible, but you can, a visual or a post-it note or a sketch or something does that sort of in between for people, and they can verbalize and kind of speak to it. Um, and then as you layer that in, you can build a greater structure, and create, sort of simple frameworks to larger, more comprehensive frameworks. For example, the whole structure of a book. With Ali's book of productivity, it has 55 experiments in there, but you would never know that there were because it's just not kind of tangible, in the book anyway, and you're not going to have a table of contents with 55 experiments. It's just too much. Um, and so one of the things that we're helping him with is to create a one-page summary, so you can kind of see that as a whole. And it also enables that creativity and thinking for the reader as well, because they can kind of begin to access it versus just all these words in a book, page after page after page. It can also be overwhelming. So I think it's this really interesting way of opening and unpacking thinking and ideas and concepts, understanding them, but also applying them and taking them on, integrating them, trying them on in your life, and make progress too.
Right. I love that. I think one of the things that I appreciated about our conversation is it's not what people expect. And I think that's what's wonderful because I don't want people to think that there's magic from me involved that makes these notions come to be, because they're just sitting within the person. Some of them they're aware of, and some of them they're not. Let me give you an example that's more concrete. I had a woman, I shared her story many times. Her name's Dana Malstaff, and she wanted to write a book about her business, which often, that makes sense. You have a business, you want to have a blog. She had a blog, a podcast called Expand Your Reach. And she thought, I'll just write the book, Expand Your Reach, because that makes sense. So I said, great, why don't you draw it for me? And she said, well, I have an outline. I just thought I'd show that to you. I said, okay, great. You can put it over there. Can you just draw me your book? And she's like, oh, okay, I'm trusting you. I said, yeah, please trust me. And she drew her book. And then one of the things I say is don't hold back. If something comes up, put it down. If it seems totally abstract and doesn't belong, definitely put it down. Your mind's telling you something, but don't think too much. In fact, don't think at all. Just let whatever comes. And as she was sharing her visual map, a lot of the things came from the outline of that she originally had. But there was an image with a little bucket with a little heart on it, like a pail for a kid at the beach kind of thing. And I said, what's this? And she said, well, this is my love bucket. I said, what's love got to do with it? Like to quote Tina Turner, I go, what's a love bucket? She goes, well, you said don't put things that came to my mind. And I said, well, why is it there? And she said, well, that's for entrepreneurs, moms who feel like they can't be a great entrepreneur and be a great mom because they love their business so much some days more than their kids, and they feel terrible and guilt. Or a man will go play golf half of a day and call it networking and feel great about it. He doesn't care the kids are at school or in daycare. But a mom has this guilt, and I don't think moms should have it. I think moms should feel confident that they don't have to love boogers and diapers all the times to clean up after a kid. They can enjoy their business, and they don't have to just fight for their time in between naps and sacrifice themselves. And I think moms should be boss moms. I was like, boss moms? Wow. Interesting. She's like, you're going to make me do this little visual map thing again, aren't you? And I said, I'm just curious why a bucket of love you didn't think mattered, you talked about for like 15 minutes. I'm just curious. And she did. She redrew it. She drew the map with the bucket of love in the middle. Her idea, Boss Mom, came to fruition. And that's the book she wrote. And she just revised it after 10 years. Her whole business was built on this idea that you don't have to be the mompreneur who sacrifices herself. You could be a boss mom. And that came from the unpluggedness of not thinking. It was always there, but letting go of what she thought should be there. And I think that's where the magic things that I bring to the table is uncertainty, but trusting that in the uncertainty comes the answer. Sounds like a little bit of uncertainty is happening in your work as well. Does something like that? Tell me what that sparks for you, and what kind of work happens with your clients?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. I think it really yeah, I learn a lot about your work in terms of when you meet people, they are, you know, a book is this ominous thing, right? or at least I think that's how people take it or perceive it. Like they've got to be known for something, and it's in print and it's physical, and they collect all these fears. And I can see how so much of your work is loosening that, and just seeing that's just a bunch of thoughts between your ears, and it doesn't mean anything. Um, Interestingly, when I work with people, they're in a they're in a flow, they're in a momentum, and they're almost coming at it inside out. They're not they've found their thread, and they need to give that thread some sort of shape or form. And I feel like when people work with you, they come to you to like find their thread. So I'm perhaps like the next step in their journey, and they're like giving shape and form to that thread and structure, um, to either write in their book or to to build into their business practice. Whether that's a coaching practice, a group program that they might create. So if we take your example with Boss Mom, um, she's got it really clear about this and this idea, but how to actually help people be boss moms? How do I put that into practice? What does that really look like tangibly? We've got the idea, which is great, but how do I actually flesh that out and give that form and structure, um, which on one hand can help and inform the book, but on another hand, can be like the next step after the book. So these are all the concepts, but now how do we put this into action? You have books that are more action focused, books that are more sort of why focused, or so it kind of is in this sort of open space that the main thing that we sort of come out with an output is like the methodology of how to be a boss mom, how to do feel good productivity, so that that person can take that concept and begin actioning it as quickly as possible in their life, um, to actually, because that's where the learning happens. That's where the insights happen, the integration happens, and you sort of take someone's framework not as like gold gospel, but as a sort of a starting point to sort of build upon and create your own framework. But you have a head start, you have a structure in which to um, implement and explore the sort of concepts that the author shares.
That's great. I've always struggled with, ironically, writing a book about writing because I don't really teach writing, so it's sort of confusing to people when they come to work with me. Um, but what I do teach is it's a series of unlearning that I have to do with the principles of what they thought writing was. Because for me, it's a message. If I can't talk about what you've wrote about, it doesn't matter how lovely it's written, how many quotes you have, how well executed the editing is. If I can't talk about your work, it doesn't matter. Your work is only living off is when it's off the page. It's sort of it's the fuel for someone who's going to bring it off the page. So the message matters more than the words. I'm trying to get them to understand that how simple an idea is. The clarity of an idea is more important than the words that would make the idea clear. and so if I could, I'd make them dance it. Dance me your idea. And they'd probably hate me for it. I would probably say, here's a box of children's toys. Pick out the thing that strikes you that's most important about your idea. Because I want them to separate themselves from words first and look deeply into themselves. When you're doing these signature sort of programs with people, what have they been able to do as a result of doing this work of mapping out their framework of after the book?
Yeah. So I'm completely with you in terms of, what is the message? What is the idea? So it's like, what's the why? And then it's what's the how, right? And so for me, it's all about the action. That's where the learning happens and where the results happen. And so when I work with clients and they get that clarity in that how, every everything sort of changes. They can write about what they do more readily. in their marketing, in their YouTube content, their social media content, in their webinars, in their workshops, their products, whether that's their coaching practice, their course, their book, are clearer and easier to create and reliably enable results for. And sales conversations are simpler and clearer. They can explain the value of what the product is and how it will help someone. And their methodology stands out, in terms of like, why should I pick you instead of someone else on X? Well, here's our methodology. This is how we can enable you to achieve results. And that clarity, that path for people, but it's so often rarely done, never done well. It just makes the sales conversation simpler and clearer. And people can explain to their friends and their colleagues more readily, why we're going for this program or this coaching experience. And so
Yeah.
it just unlocks their ability to build their business and stand out in their marketing, and be known for their work and for really delivering the results that they speak to in their message.
What would be a piece of advice you would give to an author, let's say, who already has a book, but maybe haven't moved farther down the path of their framework? What's something they can do to kind of move forward with the next step if they want to do some sort of maybe coaching or build a course or a program based on their book ideas?
Well, if you've already got a book, you've already structured a lot of your thinking, which is great. And to revisit that and create those drawings, those diagrams that ideally you would have done as part of the writing process. And if you have, great, pick those up, um, and make those drawings less like internal drawings, but more public facing drawings that you could share more readily in your social media, and use in your products, in your sales materials, because people trust what they can see. People can remember and understand what you do more easily through visuals, and they can retain it longer as well, um, and create sort of a visual brand around the visuals that you create too. So when people see something, they recognize that it's you, and they begin to get to know you visually as well as through your message and through your words as well. So it's effectively the process that I would do with clients from the outset. But the point is, it's never too late. And there's always benefit in doing that. And it will only strengthen and reinforce your ideas. And through that process, you may discover other things to use and kind of build in your business, because that's just part of what that creative and thinking process does. Um, and that's just really how you leverage your thought leadership and your brand and build on it, and become more visible for what you do.
That's great. I think all leaders, and particularly authors, want that. I think sometimes they can be tired. It's a long road to write a book. And it's always great to have help and support and know what to do. Probably, I'm imagining people are thinking, oh, maybe I need a framework. I wonder what that means for me. Where would they go to learn more about you, Charlotte? Where would they find about your work or about how you work with clients so they can maybe learn about the process of their own signature framework?
Thanks. Yeah. So I have a website, signaframework.co. I'm on LinkedIn, Charlotte Crowther. I'm on YouTube, and yeah, you can also just reach out to me. You'll see my contact through the website. And yeah, just love to hear from you. If you've got any questions or comments from listening from our conversation today. Yeah, it'd be a pleasure to be in touch and talk more.
Yeah. And I think the plug I'll give, because I've not worked with you, so I'm not doing this with some sort of bias, but I find your ability to see clearly really striking, because it's one thing to do it as an artist for yourself, to bring clarity to a vision of a piece of work. It's a whole nother thing to bring clarity to someone or with someone else about their work. I think that's an extraordinary gift. That's not always something that most people have. People sometimes will rely on their own framework and not draw the the other person in. But from even our conversations, I know that your open, creative, and intuitive mind is how some of this beautiful work gets done. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for being here and being present with us. Um, I know from the two humans that we both know, Baven and Ali, how much, how highly they think of you and how important that is when you're working with a creative with their work. They really want to trust the person they're giving their baby to make it better. And I know that you're a good guide for them. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. I know that it will make a huge difference in those people who are trying to make clarity around what a book can do for them. And if you're out there listening, wondering, well, I wrote a book, but I don't know if I can make anything of it. Oh my gosh. Charlotte said it. It's not too late. You can start right now. You could look at those notes. You can reorganize your plan, and you can really make an incredible program out of your book and your message. And Charlotte, thank you for being the guest here to help us. And we appreciate all that you've already given us.
Thank you, Azul, for your kind words, for your listening and seeing of me and of our conversation. I appreciate you for how much you take care of authors and their babies too, and how you really connect at a human level so that their message can touch them and others.
Awesome. Thank you so much.